Hello there and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo and your host Joe Rimmer, joined today by Echo reporter Ryan Paton. It's the first time we've done a podcast since Thursday in which we reacted to the tragic news that Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva had been killed in a car crash in Spain. First of all, those of you who watched on Thursday will know that we just dispensed with any housekeeping at the start, so we'll do that again today. I don't think it's the time or the place, so we'll just try and get straight into it. Ryan was over in Portugal for the Echo, reporting from Gondomar, which is Diogo Jota's hometown and Andre Silva's hometown. First of all, I thought it was important, Ryan, for us to talk about why you were there, why it was important for the Echo to go out there and cover his funeral.
Yeah, so obviously, like everyone last week when the news broke, it was truly heartbreaking, just absolutely tragic, and just trying to process it and come to terms with the incomprehensible tragedy. But thought it was quite important for us to pay tribute to Jota's legacy. Obviously, we knew why he mattered so much to Liverpool and in the Liverpool community. But it was more to find out about his roots in Gondomar, and sort of to pay tribute to them and sort of to find out about why he became the person that he did and why he mattered so much to the community.
Mm-hmm. Let's start then with Gondomar itself. For those who don't know, where is Gondomar? What is it like? Obviously, it's where Jota grew up, and he has quite a unique story, doesn't he, in terms of Portuguese footballers?
Yeah, absolutely. I stayed in Porto during my time there, but Gondomar is it's 7 kilometers east of Porto.
Okay.
But it's actually, even though that doesn't sound like that far of a distance, it's not. There's not much connections between it via public transport. So it's like there's Porto's like sort of surrounded by these ring roads and like almost like a motorway. And to travel to Gondomar, it was like a 25 to 30 minute taxi ride from the centre of Porto. So yeah, it's Gondomar is where Porto feels very much like you're in the centre of a major city. Gondomar feels very quieter than that. It feels a bit like it's got its own more separate identity, more of a separate community. It's felt a bit more like a sleepy suburb type place.
Okay.
And I think that's why one of the reasons why when I spoke to a lot of people is why Jota is so important to people within that community, because he stayed within that community all the way through his younger years. Because I think a lot of something that I found was that the path of like Portuguese footballers, a lot of them is like when I was talking to people, it's like the traditional path to players who become members of the Portuguese national side is that when they're in their teenage years, when they're showing signs that they will be a promising footballer, they tend to be snatched up by the bigger sides, the likes of your Benfica or Sporting Lisbon. And I think what's really valued by the people in Gondomar is how Jota's route is completely different. It's totally unique in that he signed for Gondomar when he was he signed up for Gondomar Sports Club when he was really young, which is a team in the 4th tier of Portuguese football. Got a really small stadium. I think it's like a multi-use stadium called the Estadio de São Miguel. I think it was, and he stayed at that club up until he was 17 before he joined another another Portuguese side called Paços de Ferreira. And the fact that he went from that at 17 years old to still playing for Gondomar Sports Club, but then still managed to have the career that he has. That he went from Paços de Ferreira, he went to Atletico Madrid, and then had a very brief loan spell at Porto before he made the move to England and Wolves and then Liverpool. And the people that he spoke to, they valued that he. Like it was very often referred to that he was, he remained a boy from Gondomar. He represented the local community. Like he embodied their values, and he was truly representative of that community. And he was someone who was putting Gondomar on the world map. Yeah. And I think in the mural at Gondomar Sports Club, that was put up after the academy was named after Jota in 2022, and it sort of alludes to what Jota symbolises and means to that community, because it's a picture of Jota as a youngster in the Gondomar Sports Club kit, and then one when he was older, when he's representing the Portuguese national side, which obviously something unbelievable, that very proud for the people of Gondomar, that someone from their small city became a key player for the Portugal national side. And the translation of the quote is it's not important where we come from, but where we're going. And I think that was in all the conversations that I had with people, locals who wanted to pay tribute and share their respects to Jota. That was a common theme, was that he kept on mentioning that, you know, he stayed true to Gondomar. He was at Gondomar until he was 17, and then he went on then to achieve these incredible heights, and that's why he symbolised and meant so much to that community, because he was emblematic of that, you know, people from Gondomar can make their dreams come true.
Yeah, I know you mentioned earlier of those conversations with people you did have. The love for him was clear, and you had some quite interesting and nice exchanges with those people that clearly held him so dearly.
Yeah, because obviously, you know, Gondomar is it's a community in mourning. Like you go there, and there was a somber atmosphere, because you could tell two beloved figures in the community of Diogo Jota and Andre Silva had died in this incomprehensible tragedy. And I think the people in the city were struggling to come to terms with it and struggling to process it in the way that everyone in Liverpool is, just trying to, in no way you can come to terms with this incomprehensible tragedy. And so the people that I was talking to, they wanted to, you know, pay tribute and share their memories. And it's sort of, when I was speaking to, I went to the neighbourhood where Diogo and Andre grew up, and spoke to some of his childhood friends. Yeah. And one of his next door neighbours, when they were growing up, a guy called Cosme Oliveira, he was really, he was touched by how, when I was speaking to him about the response to what's happened in Liverpool, he was touched by that, and because he was saying how the support he received in Liverpool, it meant so much that, like, that a boy from Gondomar managed to connect so strongly with the Liverpool community as well. Because he said to me, you guys always received him well, so I think we all have to thank you for the way you welcomed our boy in your land. So it felt like when we were talking to people, when I was talking to people in that community, there was that sort of the shared thing that we were able to talk about Jota in such a pay tribute to his legacy and commemorate his memory. That was almost, it was quite heartening for both people in the conversation to be able to, because in no way I don't think will anyone ever be able to process that this has actually happened, that it's not just a crazy nightmare that the world will one day wake up from. So the only thing that we can do in sort of these moments is pay tribute to his legacy, pay tribute to his memories. And I think that's what the conversations I had with people, and hearing his memories, and me telling them about what he meant in Liverpool, that was sort of, it was heartening exchanges in what is obviously a horrible tragedy. And I think, you know, the thing with Gondomar, but what I was so taken aback and so heartened by is the humanity on show there. Everyone who you spoke to was so kind and so humble, and I think, you know, Diogo and Andre, they were always described as kind and humble people. So it's very clear that, like, that community forged them, and that's why people were kept referring to how they continually represented that community, how they were always remain grounded and humble people. And I think that's how they did it, because that's how everyone I spoke to just represented that as well.
Talk us through some of your movements over the several days that you were there. You arrived on Friday morning.
Yeah, so on Friday morning, and we knew that the mural was there of Jota at Gondomar Sports Club, which is the place where his career started, as we said. And so I thought that we headed there to sort of capture the tributes that were there, and you could see the outpouring of emotion. There was so many flowers, people lighting candles, images, scarves, not just of Gondomar, but the two guys who were Porto fans, they came and laid a Porto scarf. So you could see it was from all corners of Portuguese football. They had united to come together to grieve and mourn this loss together. So that's the first place I headed to and spoke to 3 or 4 people there who just there's one thing I have to say is in Gondomar, it's not the same as in maybe like the capital city like Lisbon, where there might be like a lot more native English speakers. A lot of people were Portuguese speaking, so and but even though there was the language barrier, obviously heightened by my accent as well, that even though that existed, every single person who I spoke to, all I had to say was, like Liverpool, Jota, and they were so helpful and would try and point me in the right direction of someone who maybe could speak English a bit more than what they could, so they could share their memories and pay tribute to Diogo and Andre that way. But yeah, so there's some of the conversations I had at Gondomar Sports Club. There was a guy there with his young son, and it was again just to speak about the standing that they had in the community. It was just really interesting to sort of to see how the guy he pointed to his 12-year-old son was a promising futsal player, and he was saying how he sort of the youth in that community cling on to Jota's story, because he's a beacon and emblem of hope to them, and and that was, and another a lady I spoke to, she was quite emotional, which was it was emotional to see her sort of she was like taking in the Jota mural, and that's what she's in her interview with me. She said he will always be a boy from Gondomar. So yeah, it was quite emotional to be there and hear their accounts of why of why his story mattered so much. And it's in the Estadio de São Miguel. It's quite an unassuming stadium from outside. I think its capacity is 2,500. So it does make it hit home just what Jota achieved in his career. That he went from that he was playing there at 17 and then became a huge star for this Liverpool side. That's one of the best in the world. It's just trying to almost think of an example of it, like to equate it to English football. It's like,
I guess it's sort of like, I remember when Liverpool bought Jordan Ibe from Wickham, at 17, and I guess that it's similar, isn't it? That like you say, and maybe even more so in Portugal, the good players will get snapped up by the big academies. So to stay in the lower leagues is quite remarkable.
It's
not normal.
I've came away from it just with like a whole new sense of it. I loved Jota as a player for Liverpool. Like he just represented so much joy on the pitch with how he was just like this incredible poacher and all his playful celebrations, and everything he represents on the pitch was he was such a lovable player. But I've came away from being in Gondomar with just an entire new sense of admiration for him, because I just realised what he has came from, and the barriers he has overcome to be the success that he has it's absolutely remarkable.
He had a very scrappy play style to the point where there was worries that he would throw himself into challenges, and obviously he had a difficult time with injuries, especially during his last couple of years at Liverpool. But I think part of that was because he was brave. He would throw himself into challenges. He would never shirk a challenge. He would try and run between players. But perhaps as well, he was scrappy on the pitch, but he was obviously scrappy off it to scrap his way to the top of football from where he was. Yeah,
because he had a totally unique playing style. Jota, I think, because he came and you think he was a left-sided forward, but then he became more utilised in the centre, and he was just a totally his own unique original player. It wasn't the fastest, but he was like, the way he dribbled was quite original and unique, and sort of when you do go to where he came from and you hear his beginnings and his journey, it makes sense of like why he did have his own standing and his own place, because his story is so much his own. So it like that would forge a player who's his own player, who's not like, he's not a traditional academy player. He's not finessed in that way. He maintained that like that raw sense of talent.
Yeah, and then on Saturday you were at his funeral. It's important to explain that there is a media part of that, and that it was broadcast, wasn't it? So that this wasn't a closed family event that you went to. It was a public event.
Yeah, I did know there was the Echo was in attendance from a designated media spot that was in accordance with the family's wishes. I think it's important to stress and clarify that. Obviously, this is an incredibly sensitive thing that has happened, and we wanted to treat that with the utmost sensitivity as well. So there wasn't any intrusion involved in this. This was these. Jota and Silva represented so much to the community of Gondomar that this service was it was a public grieving in a way, because there was so many people there that wanted to come and pay their tributes and pay their respects. So yeah, we were in a designated media spot. Those members of the public came and had lined the streets of Gondomar and were standing outside the church, which obviously to see that outpouring of support was was really, really emotional. There was so many people attended the actual service and wanted to pay their tributes and pay their respects to Diogo and Andre, that there wasn't, the church was at full capacity, so people were actually stood outside of the church, and the priest's service was broadcast on a loudspeaker, so people standing outside could listen in to pay their respects. So yeah, I think it's important to clarify that this was this was held so members of the public could also pay their respects to people who mattered so much to their community.
Yeah, lots of his teammates were there, his former teammates from previous clubs and people who've left Liverpool. Club officials. I've been thinking about how we phrase that, and I think we shouldn't call them teammates or club officials. We should call them friends. They were his friends, and there were a lot of recognisable faces there, weren't there?
Yeah. So the first that I saw arrive was Roberto Martinez, obviously now Portugal manager, former Everton manager. He was part of a huge delegation of Portuguese players. Bernardo Silva was there, Bruno Fernandes, Ruben Neves was there. Lots of Jota and Silva's compatriots were there to show their support and pay their respects. And obviously there was then the Liverpool players there, and it was that was a really, really emotional moment when Virgil van Dijk and Andy Robertson led the Liverpool delegation, and they were holding the floral tribute bearing the shirt numbers worn by Diogo and Andre. I think I wrote a piece over the weekend. So like the last time that I saw these people in the flesh was when Liverpool lifted the Premier League title, and when on the victory parade on the open top bus, and I associate seeing these people with joyful moments, with as football, just an important pastime, but a pastime nonetheless, and to see them after such a tragedy in such tragic circumstances, that hit like a hammer blow. It was really, really, really difficult, and you could see obviously they are grieving a friend, and they were really, really emotional as they were walking into the service. That was a really, really difficult and emotional moment. Yeah,
and the service itself, I guess, was quite a moving occasion.
Yeah. So there was, I think it was an hour-long service. And people held a respectful silence outside the church while it took place, and there was, I think, Ave Maria was played at one point, and that was incredibly moving moments as people like held their silence while that was played. So it was people paying their tribute and paying their respects to two people who mattered so much.
Yeah. Anything else from your trip to Gondomar that you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, but I just thought of the the day after the funeral was on the Sunday, and that was when I headed to where the place where Diogo and Andre grew up in their neighbourhoods, and people were. Everyone you spoke to was quite keen to share their memories, and they wanted to pay tribute to so people said, the place where he was from. So I travelled there on the Sunday. It was very quiet. I think it's even. I'd spent the majority of my time in the centre of Gondomar, the place where Diogo and Andre grew up was actually even further away from that. It was in the Sao Cosme neighbourhood off the Rua de Minho-Terra. I mean, sure I've butchered the pronunciation there, but that's the place where they grew up, and there was some people walking by, and they turned out to be neighbours of Diogo, and they do remember them as a child, and they held some strong memories of him. And he showed me the place. He practiced a lot as a kid, him and Andre, in his granddad's front garden. So he showed me the place where that was, and where he used to play football with Diogo and Andre. So it was really moving to see that. That was where his journey started, and it was. It couldn't have been more humble, really. Like, it was literally in a small patch of land in his granddad's front garden, and he's explained, like, they'd have tournaments where he was this Cosme who was telling me this. He was Argentina, Andre was Brazil, and Diogo was Portugal, and it was quite. He was laughing that he wasn't very good at football, so playing with them two was he always lost, and he said of course there was only ever one winner, and that was Diogo, who always wants to represent Portugal. So hearing them stories was really moving to see where the journey began for someone who enjoyed such an incredible career, and that's something that we will always treasure, and I think what's something that'll always matter. I think one thing that I was taken aback by in that neighbourhood was just how kind and generous that they were. Yeah. After I spoke to his neighbours, I went to a nearby bar, and there was the guy behind the bar didn't speak a word of English. Obviously, I don't speak a word of Portuguese, and but we bonded over. He had a Liverpool scarf behind the bar, so I pointed to that and just said, like, Liverpool, and then we sort of we're chatting in the only way that we could communicate, and he then realised no one in the bar could speak any English, so he took me to a restaurant about a 5-minute drive away to where two people could point me in more of a direction, and he bought me a beer there, which was just that sort of generosity and that sort of that humanity that was it was heartening to see that in such, because I think that's the only thing that we can cling on to after a tragedy like this is that these things still exist in the world, and that was there in a plenty in Gondomar. And in the neighbourhoods where Diogo and Andre grew up.
It's really, really well said, Ryan. Really lovely sentiments. I thought we'd finish off by, look, it must have been a really emotional few days for you. You're a Liverpool fan. So what did Jota mean to you?
Well, it's a sort of he represented joy on the pitch. Like, he was. I think in Paul Gorst's piece, he said it took 8 minutes for Liverpool fans to fall in love with Jota. He scored when that went, and it was such a goal that was so unique to him. Like, he just had this own unique playing style that you couldn't help but connect with, because it did have that rawness and that originality that it just meant that you weren't seeing this refined football. He had his own essence in a way, and it was something that you could just deeply connect to so much. So to me, just he represented joy on a pitch. He represented that, you always fancy Jota to score. He represented hope on the pitch. Like, when he was coming back from his injuries, it was always that thing where you go, Jota's on the bench. If you bring Jota on, he'll score a goal.
Get a goal.
And so I think that's what he represented, those two things, which is why we follow football in a way, as we follow football to to see players with this raw and unique talent who can score goals that like seemingly out of nowhere or they seem very, very unique to them. And Jota, that was exactly what Diogo Jota was. So yeah, he was such a incredible player to watch, and he was an easy player to fall in love with, and that's, you know, everyone has fallen in love with him in Gondomar, and everyone has fallen in love with him in Liverpool as well.
Favourite Jota goal?
It's the one against Arsenal, I think, in the Carabao Cup.
In the Carabao Cup.
Yeah. Just because again, he just had like, I don't want he lifts it over the keeper, because that was just like, it was just a moment of pure class. But then there's also the goal in the derby, where it's just sort of that was so important for Liverpool in sort of in this journey to sealing the 20th league title. And again, felt very unique to him. He could dribble in a way that was like a proper street footballer. Yeah. And so to see the place where, like, you know, in that small contained spot in his granddad's front garden was where those skills were honed. Is a sort of, it helped make sense more of it. So yeah, to think back on them now will, you know, yeah, there'll be an extra element of like sort of it'll feel even more moving.
Yeah, two I like were, in fact, against Arsenal and against Everton, but the one where he sat most of Arsenal's team down in the 4-0 at Anfield.
Yeah.
And just shifted onto his other foot. And then against Everton in the 4-1 at Goodison Park, where he rolled.
That's probably with the Cruyff turn, and then he blasted in the roof of the net. That's probably his best goal for Liverpool.
That goal, yeah. Ryan, thank you so much. And thank you for being out there and reporting on it so well. Not an easy thing to do. Liverpool return to pre-season training today, Tuesday the 8th of July. It will be a somber mood, obviously, at the AXA Training Centre. There have been some tributes laid to Jota outside. They are due, as things stand, to play a friendly against Preston North End on Sunday. Should that game go ahead, we will cover it. We will cover their return to training. We will try to do so as respectfully as possible, and we'll react to it here on the podcast as well. Thank you for those of you, and I know some of our regular listeners and others as well have sent me emails about Jota with your thoughts, your feelings. Thank you so much for that. I'm sorry that I've not got back to you. It's been a very busy few days, but thank you always for contributing and making this podcast so special. We'll get you back involved with your questions, your thoughts as we progress. We'll be back towards the end of the week to record again. Possibly Friday. I'll speak to our producer Ian, he's given me the nod. Liverpool.com will be back with their podcast. They'll be doing their own tribute to Jota in the coming days. But thank you for your support. Thank you, Ryan. And all the best. Ta-ra.